welcome to a new Getting to Know Japan webinar. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are joined by Professor Frederik Cryns, who will be presenting on An Englishman and the Shogun's Service, the remarkable story of William Adams. Professor Frederik Cryns is Professor of Japanese History at the International Research Center for Japanese Studies in Kyoto, Japan. He is the author of several best-selling books in Japanese on the history of the Sengoku period, the period in Japanese history in which the members of the samurai class fought each other continuously, an early interaction of the Western world with Japan in the 16th and 17th centuries. Frederik supervised all of the historical aspects of the television series Shogun. Probably many of you have seen it or heard about it recently. His latest book, In the Service of the Shogun, The Real History of William Adams, will be released or has been released July 3rd this year. So Professor Cryns, it is a pleasure to have you with us here today. A small reminder, everyone, please refrain from turning on your microphones during the duration of today's recording and presentation.
Thank you, Amani, and also for pronouncing my name correctly. And thanks to YCAPS for organizing this wonderful event. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with all of you. And I'm going to talk about William Adams. And to do that, I'm going to share my screen. I think you have it here. This is a picture of William Adams. We don't have any contemporary portraits of this historical figure. So I asked one of my assistants to draw a picture, and I like this one very much. Who is William Adams? Adams was an English sailor who sailed on a Dutch ship that arrived in Japan in 1600. And it was the first Dutch ship to ever reach Japan. And William Adams was questioned by Tokugawa Ieyasu, who was the most important warlord at the time. And he became a trusted advisor to the Shogun. And so this is still the end of the Sengoku period. I placed the Sengoku period at 1615. So Japan at war with a lot of samurai fighting against each other. How could it be that an English navigator could become the advisor of the Shogun? So to answer this question, I will tell you the story of his life in a historical context, and especially looking at the international situation in Japan at the time. I have to say that Adams was not the only foreigner to become a retainer of a famous warlord. You have, for example, Yasuke, who was an African person who became a retainer of Oda Nobunaga. You have Jan Joosten van Lodenstein, who was a Dutch merchant, who attained the same status as William Adams. But no foreigner had so much influence on Japanese foreign policy and also shipbuilding, for that matter, as Adams. So it's worthwhile to look into the history of this person. And so Adams was born in Gillingham in England, a small port town near London. And he learned the art of navigation from Nicholas Dickens at Limehouse, so very close to London. And after his apprenticeship, he took part in the naval battle of the English fleet against the Spanish Armada in 1588. Now, the situation in England at the time was that you had a Protestant queen, Queen Elizabeth, and England at the time was not a big country. It was not Great Britain or United Kingdom as we have it today. England and Wales were together, but for example, Scotland was independent country and an island also. And it was not on later that Scotland would join England to become Great Britain. But at this time, it was not a big country. On the other hand, Spain was a world empire at the time with a lot of colonies in South America and a very advanced army, a good economy. So England was very weak compared to Spain. Now, the Catholic king of Spain, Felipe II, was opposed to having a Protestant queen on the English throne. So he wanted Mary of Scots, who was a Catholic, to become the next queen, and he wanted to overthrow Queen Elizabeth's reign. And he tried to do that first by sending Jesuit missionaries into England. And those missionaries would connect with the Catholics in England and also the Catholics in Scotland. And together with those Catholics, the Spanish wanted to send a Spanish army and overthrow Queen Elizabeth. So the war between Spain and England was not just a war between monarchs, it was a war of faith, of religion. And Adams, who was a Protestant, grew up in this environment of religious wars. And when the Spanish fleet finally attacked England, he became a captain on one of the supply vessels of the English Navy. And the attack was successfully repelled. So the Navy was disbanded, and Adams then worked for the Barbary Company. The Barbary Company was a trading company who did trade between England and Morocco, but it was also a privateering company. So they had to pass through Spanish and Portuguese waters before reaching Morocco. And while doing that, they were hunting for Portuguese and Spanish ships because England was at war with Spain, and the trade with Morocco didn't give them enough profit, so they wanted to get more profit by capturing Spanish vessels and also doing economic damage to Spain, to weaken Spain so that they couldn't invade England anymore. And I was forgotten that I have some pictures here. So this is a picture of the battle, the sea battle between the Spanish Armada and the English fleet. And you can see the Spanish ships on the left are much larger, much bigger than the English ships. So they were very impregnable, but the English ships had the advantage that they were very swift, so they could come close, shoot at the Spanish ships, and then withdraw. And then they had to get supplies for new cannonballs and so on. And those supplies were furnished by supply ships, of which one, Adams, was the captain. Adams married Mary Hine in 1889, and they had two children. One of them was a daughter, Deliverance. And this Deliverance, this name, refers to being liberated from Spain. So you can see that Adams was very much involved in this war in this religious war against Spain. And this is a very important aspect that will have a lot of influence when Adams comes to Japan. The English ventured into Asia 2 times, the fleets of Drake and Cavendish, two pirate fleets who also attacked Spanish vessels on the way. They circumvented the American continent through the Strait of Magellan and then traversed the Atlantic Ocean to Asia, where they traded and went back to England. So these were the two first attempts of the English to venture into Asia. And the Dutch also tried in 1595, which was successful. And then they sent a lot of fleets to Asia. And one of these fleets was sent in 1598 from Rotterdam, a fleet of 5 ships in which Adams was one of the pilots. This is the route this fleet went through. So they started in Rotterdam. They had a lot of problems of contrary winds and had to stay a time at the Downs near England. But then they went to Cape Verde, which was a Portuguese colony. And this colony provided supplies for the Portuguese fleets that sailed from there to Brazil. And because they had lost a lot of time because of contrary winds, they wanted to get supplies here. But the Portuguese didn't let them land. So they sailed further until Cape Lopez, where they didn't find enough supplies. So they went to Annobon, and Annobon was also a Portuguese settlement. And because they had a lot of sick people, a lot of starving people, they decided to occupy the island and try to find supplies there. But that wasn't successful either, because the Portuguese resorted to guerrilla warfare. And so finally they decided to just traverse the Atlantic Ocean to the Strait of Magellan. Now, here they became stuck because of the winter. They couldn't get through, so they had to spend the winter here. It's a very cold place, a place where there is not much food in the winter. So a lot of sailors lost their lives here. And they started with 500 sailors, but I think at this point, they already lost half of their men. Then they went further to the north, but they got caught in a great storm. And one ship decided to sail back to Holland. Another ship was captured by the Spanish. Another ship managed to sail to Asia, to Borneo, but there they were slaughtered by the Portuguese. So there were only 2 ships left. And from those 2 ships, both ships were caught by the local Indians. Those Indians were fighting against the Spanish, but they thought that the Dutch ships were Spanish ships. So both were caught in an ambush, and both lost their captains and all their officers. So when they departed from the island of Santa Maria, you had only 2 ships with a total of about 60 men on board. And when they traversed the Pacific Ocean, they got again caught in a storm, and one of the 2 ships perished, and he had only 1 ship left, the Liefde, on which Adams was still the pilot, who reached Japan in 1600. So 2 years after they departed from Rotterdam. And only with 24 sailors left, of which 6 sailors died upon arrival in Japan. So only 18 sailors left of a fleet of 500. When they arrived in Japan, they came into the Sengoku period. Again, an illustration of one of my assistants. And the Sengoku period, Sengoku means the country at war. It's a period which is debated when it ended. Some say 1573, some say the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. Others, like myself, place it at 1615 after the Battle of Osaka. It was a period of incessant warfare among the various warlords of the warrior class. Japan was really in chaos, and everyone was fighting everyone. But then there were three great unifiers who gradually put the country under their rule, and in a certain situation of peace, and the first of them was Oda Nobunaga. Then you have Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and after Hideyoshi died in 1598, Tokugawa Ieyasu became the principal warlord in Japan. But his supremacy was challenged by other warlords. Principal upon them was Ishida Mitsunari. And in 1600, a final battle was conducted at Sekigahara, and Ieyasu became the victor and the de facto ruler of Japan from that time. Now, when Ieyasu became the ruler, he first had to consolidate his power, and he also had to restore international relations, because his predecessor, Hideyoshi, had invaded Korea 2 times, and Korea was held by China at the time. So all relations with those 2 countries were cut off. And Ieyasu really wanted to restore peaceful relations with those countries. He could obtain that with Korea, but he could never obtain that with Ming China. So what was Japan's international environment around 1600? We have at this time the age of discovery, and especially Portugal and Spain did a lot of global expansion of their empires. And those 2 countries were the first to do that. So they made a treaty, first of Tordesillas in 1494, and then the Treaty of Zaragoza in 1529, in which they divided the earth between the 2 of them. So everything here in the middle, so the African continent and the Asian continent, was to be colonized by the Portuguese, and the rest by the Spanish. Now you see at the left that there is a portion where you see Brazil. Brazil was exceptionally given to Portugal, and you have here the Philippines, which are well within the Portuguese range, but the Spanish colonized the Philippines. And some interesting feat is that you see that this line goes through Japan. So they had a vision that the west of Japan would be for the Portuguese and the east for the Spanish. Now the Portuguese reached Japan in 1543 and sent regularly ships to Japan after that. In 1549, the Jesuits came also to Japan and began to propagate the Christian faith. which was very successful. They made a lot of converts. And from 1571 on, Portuguese ships sailed annually from Macau to Nagasaki. And here you see on the left in a Namban Zubyobu. So Namban means the southern barbarians. So the Japanese called the Portuguese southern barbarians because the ships came from the south, and they saw the Portuguese as other people, so they saw them as barbarians. And then you see here the Portuguese ship. This is called a carrack or a nao in Portuguese. Those carracks were gigantic ships of about 1,500 tons. So they could carry a year's worth of all Japanese imports. And because the Japanese couldn't trade directly with China, the Portuguese had a base in Macau in China, so they imported all the Chinese products that the Japanese needed, and they needed a lot of Chinese products, especially Chinese silk, because the Japanese aristocracy, the samurai, the warriors, the wealthy merchants, they all wore garments of silk. So there was a very large silk garment industry here in Kyoto, where I'm based, which is still present today. But at that time, you didn't have cars, or you didn't have computers and all those things. So the amount of products was limited. So the garment industry had a very large portion of the economy, apart from the rice tail. So if such a ship wouldn't come for a year, Japanese economy would be in great disorder. So it was imperative for Ieyasu to have other sources to get those Chinese silks into Japan. So he really wanted to break the Portuguese monopoly, and therefore he tried to engage the Spanish, who were in the Philippines, and who also had contacts with China, because there were a lot of Chinese vessels coming to the Philippines. So he wanted to attract the Spanish to send ships to Japan, which they did very reluctantly, because the Spanish, they wanted to send those silk goods to Spain, because they also had a silk garment industry. And they really didn't need Japanese silver. They had enough silver mines in South America. So that's why the Spanish were not very keen to trade with the Japanese. I'm seeing that I'm not going over time. So this is the situation in which the Leifter reached Bungo in Kyushu in 1600. And 2 persons were sent to Osaka, because Ieyasu was residing at the time in Osaka Castle, to be questioned. Normally it would have been the captain, but the captain was very sick. So the next one to go was the pilot, which was Adams. And he was accompanied by Jan Joosten van Lodenstein, who was a Dutch merchant from a prestigious family in Delft, Holland. And here you see a picture of Ieyasu. This is a very rare picture, which we have in our library in Nichibunken. When he was already old, in 1600, he wasn't very young yet. And more importantly, I can tell you a lot about William Adams, because we have a lot of sources on William Adams. And one of those sources are William Adams' letters. There are a lot of letters, I think 11 letters left to us. And in those letters, he writes very detailed about everything that happened. And he wrote very detailed about his intercourse with Tokugawa Ieyasu. It is to say, I don't think that there are any Japanese sources of the time who give such detailed explanations of what Ieyasu said or what kind of conversations he had. So if you take Japanese sources, it's like something like Ieyasu met with the Dutch, and that's all. There is no record of his communications. But here, for example, you see a letter written by William Adams to his wife, undated, but I think that it was written in 1611. And here you see coming before the king, coming before the king, where is it? Oh, here. He viewed me well and seemed to be wonderful, favorable. He made many signs unto me, some of which I understood and some I did not. In the end, there came one that could speak Portuguese. So in the first, they were making signs to each other, and then they could communicate in Portuguese. Probably Adams had a little knowledge of that language. And so here he goes in detail about what he talked to about to Ieyasu. And here he said, I showed unto him the name of our country, and that our land has long sought out the East Indies and desired friendship with all kings and potentates in way of merchandise, having in our land diverse commodities which these lands had not, and also to buy such merchandise in this land which our country had not. So he basically is propagating free trade. And this must have sounded like music in the ears of Ieyasu, because he was the one who wanted to get rid of the Portuguese monopoly, and he wanted to get as many foreign countries to come to Japan to trade. So he made Adams his advisor and his tutor. Adams was not allowed to leave the country. He had to stay with Ieyasu. And he also was asked to build two Western ships for Ieyasu. This was very important for Japan because the Japanese shipbuilders wanted to have Western shipbuilding techniques, which they could use to build junk ships, which were sent to all places in Asia to obtain, among others, Chinese silks and other imported wares. So this transfer of Western shipbuilding techniques to the Japanese allowed the Japanese to sail into the open seas and to enlarge their trading opportunities and their relations with all countries in Asia. So this was a great accomplishment of Adams, and he also acted as a mediator for trade relations between the Netherlands and England. And both of those countries established trading posts in Hirado, also in Kyushu in 1609 and 1613. And for all these accomplishments, Adams was promoted to hatamoto, which means direct retainer of the shogun. And he was awarded a fiefdom in, this is Hirado. I go further, a fiefdom in Hemi, where he got a land with about 90 families serving him. You can see this is a picture, an illustration of Hemi, where he had his fief. of the Edo period, and this was much later, I think 200 years later, but you can still see Anjin Yashiki here, which means Adam's residence, just near the Jodoji, the Jodo temple. Here you see a small village, which was of which he was the owner and the lord. So very remarkable for a foreigner to get such a position. So why did Ieyasu valued Adams? I think there are a lot of answers to that question. The first, most important, I think, was that Adams had the same views on foreign policy as Ieyasu had. He propagated free trade, which Ieyasu also wanted. But apart from that, from all the documents I've read about Adams and all his letters, you can say that he had a very honest personality, and he was not afraid to say his opinion. And Ieyasu disliked insincerity, so he punished insincere people, vassals, very harshly, and he tried to gather as much as able men as possible around him. So Adams was one of them. Another aspect of Adams was that he could advise from a third-party perspective. You had the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, and the English, who all came to say to Ieyasu, the Portuguese and the Spanish, saying that the Dutch were only pirates and you have to banish them. The Dutch and the English saying that the Portuguese and the Spanish want to conquer Japan. So they are all acting in their own interest. And Adams didn't have that that bias. He just said it as it was. So that was very valuable for Ieyasu. And lastly, Adams had a profound knowledge of world affairs, of mathematics, navigation, and so on. And Ieyasu was very keen, always very keen to acquire new knowledge and technology. So they got on very, very well. And I think there was a strong bond of trust between them. So now I have to go very fast. One problem arose was that the Spanish came to Japan, and in 1611, they sent a Spanish ambassador, Sebastian Vizcaino, who had an audience with Ieyasu, which was not very good because he propagated that Ieyasu should banish the Dutch, and if he does that, or I have a picture of Vizcaino here, if he would banish the Dutch, he would be friends with the Spanish king. So that wasn't taken very good by Ieyasu, but Vizcaino requested Ieyasu's permission to survey Edo Bay, because if they wanted to send ships for trade, they had to have knowledge of how Edo Bay was. And Ieyasu gave him a written permission. Now, when Adams heard about this permission, he informed Ieyasu that the only reason for the Spanish to survey the Edo Bay was to prepare for an invasion by a large fleet. And England would never allow any country to survey her shores. The Spanish, they always sent missionaries first to convert a large number of the country's people to Christianity, and then they would conspire with the Christians to conquer the country and make it the property of the King of Spain. So this was very strong advice, and this advice came from Adams' youthful experiences when he was fighting Spain. So I don't think it was intentionally, but a few months later, Ieyasu issued a ban on Christianity in his domains. and that was expanded nationwide. Now, that was shortly before Ieyasu died. He died in 1616, and Ieyasu's son, Hidetada, distanced himself completely from Ieyasu's advisors and pursued an independent foreign policy, which was basically to shut down the country and to gather the foreigners in Hirado and Nagasaki, and his successor, Iemitsu, would confine the Dutch in Nagasaki only. And Adams was against the Catholics, but he wasn't against free trade. He was a proponent of free trade. So he was very confused about this sudden change. And this is one of his letters in Dutch, which he wrote to the head of the Dutch factory just after he heard the news. And he writes, te grote verandering van alle dingen. So there is too much change in all things, he said. And this captures all his despair that his influence now was a thing of the past. He died in 1620, so only 4 years after that at Hirado. So Adams had a lot of influence on Japanese foreign policy, but in the end, it was all done to none. And on the contrary, unintendedly, he initiated Japanese path to a closed country policy. Now I'm already a lot over time, so I will conclude. This is my new book, In the Service of the Shogun. It's gives the story of William Adams, all based on the primary sources. So if you're interested in history, please check this one out. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Professor Cryns, for your wonderful presentation. So I would like to dive into the Q&A portion, if that's okay. The first question comes from Thomas Wilkins. How is William Adams viewed by the Japanese today, both among the general population and academic communities, such as like historians?
Well, Adams is very popular in Japan. Much more popular than in England, for example. I think now with Shogun, things have changed and there is renewed interest in Adams, but in Japan, everyone knows William Adams. I think one of the reasons is because there are so many sources left. And so it was really easy for historians to study his life and to publish books on him. So you have a lot of books on Adams in Japan, and many historians who study his life and his influence. So he's really very positively regarded in Japan, almost like a foreign hero in Japan.
Thank you so much. The next question comes from Maria Petrucci. I have been in Adams' trading post location in Hirado, and my question is, what was Adams's relations with the Kyushu daimyo and the Japanese expatriates there?
Well, I think that Adams' relationship with the Kyushu daimyo was very good. We see that in some sources. When, for example, the English arrive in Hirado, the Lord of Hirado, Matsura, he says he receives the letter from King James of England, and he says, I'm going to open it when Adams comes, and he can read it for me. So he had a good relationship with all those lords. I think another lord, not from Kyushu, but when the Hasekura embassy went to Spain, they were also talking about Adams to the Spanish. So he had a lot of good relationships with different lords there. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Amit Newfield. What drove you to research about William Adams?
Well, I already told in some interviews that I've seen Shogun in 1980 and that I was interested in Japanese history at the time. But I didn't immediately study about Adams. I studied about Japanese history, but then we did a project on the Dutch archives, the Dutch Hirado factory archives. And I found a lot of records on Adams in those archives because when the Dutch came to Japan, they employed Adams as their advisor. And so they had a lot of interaction with Adams and a lot of sources which until then were not researched by anyone came to my eyes. And I really got interested in this person because all the Dutch sources write such nice things of him. So I started studying him from the Dutch, the Portuguese, the English, and also the Japanese sources. And I gradually got very fond of him. So I thought I really wanted to write a book on him.
That's really interesting that you studied all of the various sources to kind of get a more complete picture about who William Adams is. Thank you so much. The next question comes from Hugh Pian Tran. So William Adams was originally from the West. And when he came to Japan and then he worked as an advisor under the Tokugawa Shogunate, what made him one of the influential people in the closed trade policy with outside elements of Japan during this period? Thank you so much.
Well, at the time, Japan wasn't closed. Everyone could come in the country freely. And so the Portuguese and the Spanish came to Japan at the time, and they called it the Christian century. There was a lot of influence from the West in Japan, in fashion, in all kinds of art objects, and so on, in thoughts also. So Japan was totally free at the time. It was only after Ieyasu's death that his son started the closed country policy. And this is something that is quite misunderstood. Everyone thinks Ieyasu was the one who started it. No, Ieyasu wanted an open country, and he prohibited Christianity, but he didn't prohibit foreigners to come and reside in Japan. So you had Portuguese, Spanish, Italians, Dutch, English, Chinese, Koreans, and so on, who were living in Kyoto, in Osaka, in Edo. It was a very cosmopolitan era at the time. But then with Hidetada, who really wanted to consolidate all the power into Tokugawa hands, he saw the foreign influence as a threat to his rule, because daimyo in Kyushu, for example, they could get help from the Portuguese and the Spanish to overthrow the Tokugawa government. So he wanted to control everything related to foreign relations. That's why he put the Dutch and the English in Hirado and the Portuguese and the Spanish in Nagasaki. And his son, Iemitsu, went a step further. He banished the Portuguese, and the Spanish didn't come at all at the time already. And the English were already gone because they couldn't get enough profit from the Japan trade. So the only Westerners left were the Dutch, and they were imprisoned, as to say so, in an artificial island in Nagasaki. So the closed country policy is really something after Adams' time.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from our Executive Director, Mr. John Bradford. So both Hemi and Hirado claim to be Adams's burial site. Both have grave markers. It seems to me that the evidence I've seen backing up both claims is a bit thin. Can you share your thoughts on this topic?
Well, Adams died in Hirado, and the English buried him there. So it's almost certain that his grave is still in Hirado. And there are a lot of legends that his bones were then transferred to Hemi. But I think it's not really possible at the time. He was buried in 1620. The English left in 1623. So then those bones would be excavated and then brought to Hemi. I'm not really buying in that. Perhaps one theory, but it's just speculation, is that the bones in Hemi could be of his son, which Joseph, which was also he was also called Miura Anjin. But most probably they were in Hirado, but I'm not sure that the bones they excavated lately were really his bones. There's not much left.
Thank you so much. I'd like to follow up that question with the question from Timothy Langley. I sailed to Miura on the tip of the Yokohama Peninsula. I heard that Adams was buried here, and it makes sense. The Miura Anjin references this port village. So what's the story?
William Adams had a fief in Hemi, in the Miura Peninsula, and that's why he was called Miura. And Anjin means pilot, so he was the pilot of Miura. That was how he was called. And so he lived there, and he was quite loved by his retainers there. That we can see from the sources who tell us that when he arrived in Hemi, because mostly he was staying in Edo, like the other lords, but sometimes he went back to his fief. And when he went back, then all the retainers joined him in a procession when he reached the village. So he was really liked there. And probably for this reason, people wanted to have his bones buried in Miura because he had such a good relationship with that domain. But as I told you before, he was buried in Hirado. We know that from the English sources. So I'm not sure. There are no sources, but if his bones were then transferred to Hemi or not, that will always be shrouded in mystery.
Thank you so much. Maybe the final two questions for the sake of time. Vivian Ying asked, what happened to the descendants of William Adams? You mentioned his son. Did he have any other descendants?
There are no sources whatsoever of his grandchildren, to say so. Probably his family was until his son, and his son didn't have children, or I'm not sure about that. Perhaps they had, but they were not. They didn't play a significant role in history, and that's why they are not recorded in any documents. Could also be, unfortunately, without any sources, we can't say anything with certainty.
Thank you so much. And the final question comes from Amy Chavez. Where in Japan can we see original documents from Adams or documents in Japanese about Adams from that time? Are they on display or stored in museums, libraries, perhaps a museum in Hirado?
Ah, uh, I must say that there are not much sources left in Japanese on Adams. So you have a few, let's say, stories about Adams, of sort of memoirs, which were then published. So they are, where are they? I've seen them in published form, but they could be, for example, in the National Library. The most important source, I think, is the diary of Suden, who was a monk and who stood in for all the diplomatic documents of Ieyasu. And this document, this diary, is kept in the Nanzenji, a Zen temple in Kyoto. But no one can go there and ask to show it. There is a facsimile edition of it. And for the rest, all the sources I've used are in the British Library, for example, the Bodleian Library in Oxford, or the National Archives in The Hague, or the Spanish archives, the Portuguese archives. So most of the documents on Adams are preserved outside of Japan, and only a small portion, only a few. Oh, there's one more. It's not really a document, but the statue of Erasmus, which was on the ship, the leave the which brought Adams to Japan, is in the Tokyo National Museum. So that's something you really want to go and take a look at, I think.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of this wonderful information with us. And thank you once again to our audience for all the amazing questions. There's so many other questions that we wanted to ask, but due to time, we are not able to. So I just want to say thank you again, Professor Cryns, for your presentation today and taking time out of your day to be with us.
Yes, thank
And
you.
thank you so much. And
And thank you all for listening and for asking such thoughtful questions.
thank you. Everyone, please, if you have the opportunity, please check out Professor Cryns' brand new book. I believe the link has been shared in the chat. So if you would like to learn more about his research, please support and read his book that just recently came out this month. A couple of weeks ago, actually, yes.
Yeah.
So to conclude, so once again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you so much, Professor Cryns, for your time today. And we hope to see you at the next Getting to Know Japan webinar and also at more YCAPS events in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
FadTech's IT support and mobile internet service helps make events like this one possible. Thank you.